had a lot of company. My mom always said, you got to put the past behind you before you can move on. And I think that's what my run was all about. I had run for 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours.
Quiet, he's going to say something.
I'm pretty tired. I think I'll go home now.
Now what are we supposed to do?
And just like that, my running days was over.
What do you say, 3 years, 6 months, 14 days? We laugh because we think that's a long time to be running. But if some of us are honest with ourselves, we look at our life, some of us have been running from something maybe even longer than that. You ever had anybody tell you that you look exhausted? How do you feel when they tell you that you look exhausted? I know how my mother feels. I've told her that before. Do I look that bad, Tim? You know if somebody recognizes that you look tired, that you have to look terrible. Women start thinking about their makeup. You start trying to fix your hair. You know that phrase that you've been rode hard and put up wet? I've heard that phrase before, but I had to go check it to see what it actually really meant before I told you, because I didn't want to have some kind of bad meaning and I didn't know about. But it's actually like a horse, right? That runs and gets sweaty and then gets put up while it's still sweaty. And you know what that feels like, right? I had to take a shower last night before I laid down because I was running. We ran I call it the Alpine Loop. I've been getting back into running again. I've signed up for another one of those Spartan races. So y'all hear stories about my whines and complaints and blisters once I get back over that again. Running makes you tired. Now, there's a point that you get if you're a runner where you hit this wall, but then if you push through it, you can just kind of keep going forever. But for me, that's about mile 4. If I can overcome the 4th mile and just keep going, mile 6, 8, 10, 12, it don't really matter after that. It's all kind of the same. Now, I've heard once you get up in the 20s that it starts to matter again. I've never ran that far. I couldn't tell you. But I could run and run and run, and I guess I wanted to share that with you because sometimes the longer we run, the easier it is for us just to keep running. But I know when I stop running that all that pain and all that process of being tired and the fatigue that comes with that, I know at some point that is going to catch up with me. If you've ran from anything in your life long enough, you know there's a time that comes when your pain, your hurt, what you're running from catches you and completely overwhelms you. But you also have to acknowledge the reality of this. At some point, you've got to stop running. You can't run forever. I want to share a scripture with you this morning from Jeremiah 6:14. He doesn't quite call it running, but in so many words it means the same thing. Let me share this version with you because it's the version that you may be familiar with, and then let me tell you what it actually means. Okay? Jeremiah 6:14. He says, they offer superficial treatments for my people's mortal wound. Now, you can probably deduce enough from that to think that you're putting a Band-Aid on a missing limb. He says it in another translation, and actually a paraphrase of the Bible another way. Pull that one up. And when I read this, what God wanted me to share with you today. That same scripture means you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. Just because you say nothing's wrong, don't mean there ain't something wrong. Just because you're hurt and wounded and running, don't mean you're outrunning anything. Running away from a hurt, from a wound, running away from anything in your life is like putting a Band-Aid on a missing limb, arm, leg. It's not going to help. And at some point, you have got to stop running. I spent a lot of years of my professional life before I graduated college in the grocery business, and you know what it's like to live and work with the public in a small town. One of the things that you always do is you make small talk with people. You know, how's your corn doing? Ask us how our corn's doing. Their corn's growing so fast I can't keep it all in the buckets, right? But you make small talk. How's your mama? How's your foot? You see them on crutches. You must have twisted your ankle or had a knee replacement. Or you see them with the obvious, right? Their hair is gone, or they have an eye patch on, or they have a brace on their arm or their elbow. You make small talk. One of the things that we always do, and you and I probably always will do it, how you doing? You know, when you ask somebody that, you don't really, I don't know, maybe you care, but you want to hear the elevator version. You don't really want to know the full extent of their problems. Maybe you do, I don't know. When I was in the grocery business, they told us not to ask people that question. They're training. They said, don't ask people how they're doing unless you care to stick around long enough to hear the whole story of how they're going. How long did it take you to recognize that the people that tell you they're doing all right may not actually be doing all right? You ever had to tell somebody when they ask you, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. And the inside of your heart would just rip to shreds when you said it. Because you knew you weren't doing that good. You hurt, lonely, broken, confused. I bet the first time you had to tell somebody that you were all right is the first time you realize that all those people you ask how you doing and they say they're all right. It's probably the first time you recognize that just because they say they're all right don't mean they're all right. I used to have this pastor, and he'd put his hand on my shoulder and he'd say, how you doing? It's David Dorn said it was. I'd say, how you doing? And I'd say, I'm doing good. He'd pull me in a little bit. No, seriously. How you doing? And he'd want me to be real about what was going on in my life. And he recognized the same thing that God knows, the same thing that you're learning. Just because you say you're all right, that don't always mean that you're all right. Some of us are dealing with a wound that we say is not there. But what happens when you say it's not there is that it never heals. It never gets a chance to correct itself. I actually took this verse from our Celebrate Recovery materials. It's part of one of the steps of admitting that you have a problem. They say you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. You'll never overcome the problem, whatever the problem is, by running away from it, by convincing yourself and trying to tell the world that you don't have one, that it's not there. It'll never get better. Just because you say you're all right, that don't mean you're all right. And you know that. Sometimes all right is not all right. Am I the only person in the room that sets the alarm clock earlier than they actually have to get up just so they can hit the snooze a few times before they actually really have to get up? Can anybody show me that? Do you know why I do that? The greatest feeling in the world, I did it this morning. The greatest feeling in the world is to wake up at the clock, to see what time it is, and know you can roll over and go back to sleep for just a little bit longer. Is that not the greatest thing in the world? I do that every day. I think I had it set for 5 a.m. this morning. I probably didn't get out of bed till 6:15-ish, somewhere around that time. I've got our alarm clock set for 9-minute snooze. You know you can adjust those, by the way. Your snooze has a default, but you can change it to whatever. I actually hit nap one time, and then 30 minutes later, good thing I didn't hit that when I was in a hurry, right? But there's nothing better. But I lay there in bed, and when that alarm goes off, I get up and I go over and hit snooze. Snooze doesn't deal with the alarm. It just puts it off a few more minutes. And I can go lay back down, I can get some peace. And that thing starts going off again, and I get up and I go hit the snooze, and I smile and I go back to bed. And I do it over and over and over again. But here's the truth. No matter how many times I hit the snooze button, at some point I have to deal with the alarm. Yep. At some point I can't hit snooze anymore. At some point I can't go back to bed and roll over and act like the alarm is not going off. Ding, ding, ding. I got to deal with the alarm. How many of us have problems in our life, wounds that we say is not there, and for years all we've ever been doing is hit the snooze button? We have never dealt with the alarm. Because once you deal with the alarm, you turn the snooze button off, you're willing to tackle the issue, it's over. You've taken care of that until there comes another alarm. And if you've ever dealt with one, you know there's another one coming. My dad told me one time, he's full of common sense. And anything he tells me, I'm going to say, is that in the Bible? And he'll say, that's probably Proverbs somewhere. You just haven't read all of it yet. He said, Tim, he told me this when I was a teenager. He said, your whole life, you'll say, my life would be going great if it wasn't for this thing. He said, you know what I've learned? There'll always be a thing. He said, if it's not one thing, it's another. You know what happens with problems that you won't acknowledge? They get worse. They compound. The wound gets deeper. It grows. Something you could have dealt with at the beginning of the problem that was not that big. Maybe at the time it felt like a huge issue that you put off and you put off and you deny and you run away from. It just grows and grows and grows. And by the time you're actually ready to think about tackling the monster, it is such a monster you're afraid even more. But if you never acknowledge the problem, all those problems that come along in life, you don't have that one thing. You got all kinds of things. So much so that you're losing your mind. Your blood pressure going up. I'm not speaking from experience or anything. Pack around all this hurt, wounds. And we think by not acknowledging them that somehow they go away. Do you see what God says? Just because you say it ain't there, don't mean that it ain't there. I was running my Alpine Loop, I call it, on Friday morning, and it was cool when I started, but at one point I recognized I had about 1.5 miles to go, and the sun had come out and it was beating down on me and I was roasting. My head felt like one of them cherry tomatoes that's growing in the garden. You know what I'm talking about, right? The ones that get so big, red and juicy, they're about to pop. That's how my head felt when I was running. And at one point I looked up and I recognized, all right, for the last 10 minutes or so of this run, I am going to roast. Here comes this little bitty cloud. I mean, it was so thin you could see through it, but it floated right over the sun, and for about 2.5 minutes, I was pain-free. But the whole time it was feeling better. You know what I knew? At some point, that sun, it's coming back out. Clouds and snooze buttons can give us temporary relief. But the real problems in our lives, at some point, we got to deal with. You may have alarms going off in your life right now. I don't know about your alarm, but you know what ours does? The longer I let it ring, the louder it gets. Does yours do that? Or are you the kind of person that as soon as you hear it, you get up, shut it off, or you let it? Mine does everything except get out a couple pots and pans. It's like one of those cartoons, right? Was it like the monkey with the cymbals? It gets so loud. It starts off slow. When it really gets ratcheted up and going good, I can feel my pulse simultaneously going off with the and I'm pretty sure the veins in my forehead are sticking out every time. My head's hurting. I'm trying to get up. I'm trying to deal with it. Do you recognize it's your problems? Do the same thing. At some point, we got to deal with it. At some point, your problem catches up with you. I got these lock-in pedals for my bike. And these shoes are about 2 sizes too little that I curl my toes up and shove down in there because I'm too tight to buy new ones. And your shoes, they'll lock into your pedal. And they help because, you know, regular bike, when you're pedaling, all you get is the push, right? But when you get these pedals on, they're locked in, you get a pull too. So when the leg comes up, and you want to race somebody that ain't got no lock-in pedals. There's a little boy that lives right across from the school. I race him every time I pass by there. He wants to run with me, and I'm like, I smoke him, wave at him. But you can fly on those things. I was out about a year ago. I was on Jackson Hollow Road, or Jackson Holler, right? Jackson Holler. I was at Jackson Holler Road, and I made a left to go up this hill, right, beside some houses, and I could hear these dogs barking. And I could tell they were moving. And I was the only moving target out there that day, so I knew them jokers was coming for me. I had geared down, I was pedaling up this hill, and about that time, I seen them coming. Now, these dogs had chased something before because they didn't get behind me and run with me. They tried to head me off. They were waiting for me. I was hoping the whole time that these dogs got after me, nobody was secretly watching or videotaping this thing. Because I was getting it just as hard as I could pedal it because I thought my life may depend on it. 2 dogs, both running like this side by side, like horses in the Derby. They're getting it out to head me off. And by the time they come out, I'm pedaling as hard as I can, and I think I'm going to get by them, but guess what happens? They get to nipping on my tire. Well, then one of them grabs a hold of the back of my shoe. And I'm thinking the whole time, I'm thinking that joker gets close to me, I'm fixing to kick at it. I'm sorry if you're a dog person, but if it's me or him, I'm choosing me. I suggest you do the same thing. He got to nipping my heel, and I'm thinking I'm fixing to kick at this joker. If I catch him one good time with this shoe, he won't ever chase me again. So I get ready to click at him, and I realize my foot is locked in. I can't do nothing. It slowed me down enough that he grabbed a hold of the back of my shoe. I finally outran him because I just kept pedaling as hard as I could. He never did get any skin, didn't damage my shoe, but I for sure knew that he was there. My problem, it caught me. But deep down I knew that it was going to. The wound that you carry today, your problem that you've been running from, that you won't acknowledge is there, deep down you know, and your greatest fear is that one day it's going to catch up to you. I'm praying today is the day that it catches you. Because you know what I know? You run because you're scared that you can't handle it. But I already know that He can.
Amen.
And when I recognize that He can, I'm content to let my problems, because I'm not afraid anymore. The only way your problem will ever get better is if you let it catch you. And you give it to the only one that can heal that wound. We watched a trailer for the new Winnie the Pooh movie coming out. That's called Christopher Robin. You might have seen that. Riley's excited about that. He's perked up. It's like a real life movie of Winnie the Pooh. And you wouldn't think you'd learn a lot of great worldly, godly advice or wisdom from Winnie the Pooh. But he said something on that trailer that I thought was extraordinary. He says, I always get where I'm going by walking away from where I've been. Until you acknowledge that hurt, that problem, that addiction, that calling, that relationship, that ringing phone of bill collectors, whatever it is, until you acknowledge that, your problem won't even let you walk away. The only way you ever get away is by acknowledging to the only one who can heal it. But until that day comes, you can't walk away from where you've been, because according to you, you ain't been nowhere. There's obvious problems that we have that we try to deal with. We try to walk away from, run away from, hide, act like it ain't there, put a Band-Aid on it. But do you recognize that even to find your salvation, you have to admit that you have a problem? And I believe that some of us still struggle with the sin problem. In order for God to save you, you have to admit that one too. You may be here still trying to outrun it this morning, but I'm praying right now that God catches you and helps you and and that you recognize that He's enough, that you don't have to keep running away. Would you stand with me today? You look exhausted. Aren't you tired of running?
I don't.
Aren't you ready to acknowledge that God is the only one that can heal you? Aren't you ready to say, God, take my problem and make something beautiful out of it? I wanted to catch you. I wanted to catch you. I know it's going to be painful. And some of this has hurt even listening to it this morning, but I know that's the only way you'll ever get better. If you're tired of running,
I don't.
if you're ready to let God have that problem, you're called this morning. Would you come pray at these altars? Lord, I pray this morning that this word for somebody will be the first step for them in admitting that they've been running away from something. God, that it would be the first step in complete healing to their lives, complete surrender in their spiritual life with you. That whatever it is, they'd be willing to admit it and let you have it. If they're not quite ready to leave it with you yet, Lord, at least would they know the reality that they can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. God, I pray for the day that they would recognize that you are enough, that they don't have to be. They quit running. Help us to trust you completely, God. Help us to place you as cornerstone of our lives. Help us to live and walk in you and your spirit and your love every day of our lives. Help us leave our problems at the foot of the cross with you. We love you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. God bless you. Have a great day.